We got a fairly substantial set of new clothes for the car coming for Austin that we've, hope will give us a decent weekend there. So we've got to deliver all that.
Hello, I'm Olivia, and today I'm joined by James, answering all your questions from the Singapore Grand Prix on this week's Akkodis Debrief. Now, James, with the way that the car looked on Friday, Sunday's result was pretty unthinkable. How much of this can be attested to the sim drivers, in this case, Fred?
I'm going to have to question the premise of that a little bit, because I think Sunday's result was pretty difficult for the team, and Friday was signalling some of maybe what we might have expected by way of difficulty. The anomaly really was Saturday, where we managed to get from a difficult Friday to a pretty creditable grid position, and there have to give great credit to the team back at the factory who really did help turn around a difficult Friday, put us much further up the grid than Friday might have suggested, and give us a result that, while disappointing, was not disastrous as a consequence. I would say that probably the trade we made, although unwittingly, was that we improved the car for single lap for qualifying, but it was quite a painful thing then on long runs.
Now, big question is the tires. Why was Lewis started on the softs, and could those tires not have lasted further into the pit stop window?
Before I give the explanation, I'll just start off by saying we shouldn't have started on the softs. That was a mistake. If we could turn back time, we would do what those around us did and select the mediums. The reasoning was that the soft tire very often allows you to get away from the start abruptly and allows you a good chance of jumping a place or two in the opening laps of the race. And we had no real expectation before the race that we were going to suffer the sort of difficulties that we then experienced on the soft rubber. So we imagined we would get the upside of the soft rubber, of getting a place or two. We didn't, because that just isn't the way the starts played out. And then we hoped that the downside of the soft being a bit more fragile wouldn't really play out particularly badly, because on the whole, if you look back over the years in Singapore, on the whole, the pace starts very, very easy at a Singapore race, and the drivers then build up the pace over many, many laps, leaving a soft tyre perfectly okay to run relatively deep into the pit window. So we didn't get the places at the start. The pace started building up from around about lap 5, and that left Lewis with a car that was not particularly happy anyway, suffering from quite poor tyre degradation and needing to come in early as a consequence, and really ruined his race for him. Yeah, so just a clear mistake.
But just off the back of that, since you did start him on the softs, there would have been a new medium available for him. Was that not considered an option, especially as it potentially would have been a benefit if there was a safety car?
It was considered. It was certainly there as a great weapon. Had there been a safety car, an opportune moment in the race, that would have been one of the upsides of that strategy. But once embarked upon the soft hard strategy, we were considering changing to a two-stop for Lewis at various points during the race, but although that would have put him out on fresher rubber and he would have been swift on that fresher rubber, all our calculations suggested that he would not actually have gained back the pit stop loss. So it was there in the hutch, could have used it, would have been good at a safety car, but in a normal uninterrupted race, which for the first time in forever we got in Singapore, that tyre was not a thing that would have helped Lewis's weekend.
Yeah, safety car probability definitely changed in Singapore after this weekend. Now on to George. How was he able to keep Leclerc behind him, especially considering how fast the Ferrari was catching up?
Well, first of all, I think great credit to George for preserving a bit of life in the tyre towards the end of the race. Big up also to the guys at HPP who got all the switch settings dead right, so that we had as much as the power unit was able to give for those very tense closing laps. And I think too that Leclerc had to take a lot out of his tyres getting to George. So we saw some very, very fast laps from Charles earlier, and that had allowed him to arrive up behind George with a few laps to have a go at him before the checkered flag. But by the time he did get there, he'd taken the edge off his tyres. There wasn't quite as much for him to sort of lean on when it came to getting by George. And then George drove very, very neat and tidily and just managed to stay ahead, which was a great relief to us and a good effort to George, who was by that stage feeling a bit second best with the heat in the car and at the end of a long race.
Just on that, there is a new DRS zone this year in Singapore. How has that changed racing and overtaking? Because it did seem extremely difficult to overtake in this race.
Well, Singapore is always pretty tough. In the normal scheme of things, you'll struggle to get by there without quite a large performance differential, and the performance differential will normally come from having newer tyres than the person you're trying to get past. The DRS zone did make it, I think, a bit more manageable than normal, but it's still at the tougher end of overtaking for the tracks.
And how are Lewis and George feeling post-race?
Well, I think like the rest of us, they're feeling fed up that the car was not particularly competitive in race trim. It was okay in quali, but not in race trim. We suffered again from a thing that has been problematic for us, which is on softer rubber at tracks where tyre temperature is at a premium, where it's very easy to overheat. We lose relative competitiveness, and Singapore is at the extreme end of that experience, and it was quite a difficult thing for them to manage. And to add insult to injury, 30 degrees air temperature, 70% relative humidity. It was very, very, very hot in the car, and at the end of the race, both of them feeling that. They feel a lot better now from the heat part of it, cold ice bath and a few drinks, and they bounce back relatively swiftly. But the more significant thing, which is caring about the pace of the car, that hurt lingers a little longer.
Now, Lewis had his 350th race start this weekend in Singapore. How does it feel to achieve that milestone with him in his final season with the team?
Lewis has had a career that I think won't ever be matched by any other driver, and for him to have done it all with one engine supplier, with Mercedes engines, is I think particularly remarkable. We're coming towards the end of our journey with him, and these, almost every weekend is a milestone, never to be repeated with Lewis. It's just a shame that it happened on a weekend where the car was not more bright, and my hope is that we won't have to go too far beyond the 350th. Maybe we can celebrate the 351st in greater style in Austin in a week or two from now.
Well, and on that, there is a bit of a break between now and Austin.
Yeah.
What are you guys going to be doing during the break?
Well, we'll be trying to figure out how to mitigate what ailed us this weekend, how to figure out how to make the tyres run better on these sort of overheating circuits. And we'll be also doing quite a lot of work to bring our last upgrade of the season together. We've got a fairly substantial set of new clothes for the car coming for Austin that we've hope will give us a decent weekend there. So we've got to deliver all that and get ourselves ready for these last few races of the year.